Daddy issues. That's what I believe is a big driver of the problem we have with young people today, whether they be boys or girls, and the insanity that we're living with and the mass confusion these kids are going through. Okay, so let me unpack what I mean by this. If we look at today's culture, essentially fatherhood or fathers are represented in a myriad of ways. So let's look at the primary ones. First off, there is the father who's the metrosexual. That's the soy boy, essentially. The father who is more in touch with his emotions than anything else. He doesn't operate in a world of logic and reason. He's driven purely by emotion. This is the father that would take their child to a drag queen storytime hour or a LGBTQ parade and pass that off to his children as something that's worthwhile and noteworthy. Not someone who would be sitting down and, let's say, unpacking any kind of religious or moral teaching, but this would be the morality of the love is love morality. And that's all they're in touch with is their feelings, and that's where their whole world paradigm operates on. Next, we have the father who is essentially the Andrew Tate version. That is the toxic father. The father who is all consumed with building just wealth, power, and everything else. He defines himself basically in what he owns. Everything is a commodity that he can proudly display, and that's what it's all about. To him, strength and power are equated with how much you can dominate someone else. That is what it's driven. There's no grace, no mercy, or compassion. I'm not saying that those aren't good virtues. Of course, you want a father who's a protector, a father who can defend his family. Totally get it. But at the end of the day, what about the fact that that father has to be someone who's there, who is, a real strength is the fact that they're at home, they're a good provider. Everybody isn't going to be a billionaire driving Lambos, but it's the father who shows up day in and day out and ensures that their kids have 3 square meals and that more importantly, they also have their time. They're committed to spending that time with them because they're not living their best life, but they're aiming to put the most into their children's lives. So that would be that father. Then we have the father, which is the married with children Al Bundy type, the basically Dave Portnoy and Barstool type father. He's the one who retreats to his man cave, the man cave that his wife permits him to have. This is the one who basically, chugs beer, watches sports, and ogles over women. This is it. And he's buried in his basement, his little domain, his little fiefdom, which he has. And this is the place where he goes to. He's essentially someone who wishes he wasn't living the life he's in either. He wants to be a frat boy for the rest of his life. Doesn't like the responsibility of fatherhood, doesn't quite sit with him. And this is his way of expressing it. So he can hang out with his fellow men and they can lament their life and live out their glory days. These are the fathers that are portrayed. Of course, in all 3 examples, we don't see any spiritual development. We don't see any pouring into children. Family or being a good husband isn't a focus of any of these 3. And certainly not to the extent that it's about basically being the head of the household and being there for the family and sacrificing. It's more, all 3 are essentially to some degree selfishness about themselves and not being selfless and pouring into family. We don't have a father's knows best, leave it to beaver type father. The one who, goes to work day in and day out. And while they may not love what they do, they love their family enough to do it. That's why they do what they do. They are the spiritual leader in the house. They're the mentor of the house. That's not to say that the wife or the mother doesn't play a role. Absolutely. But the father plays that role of showing the young men in the house how to behave like a husband. That's what they show. They put the best foot on forward. Do they get it right all the time? No, absolutely not. They also show their young daughters what it means to be a loving husband and how they should be pouring into their wife and how they should be looking after the family. That's what that father does. But most importantly, what he does is he gives himself. Like I said, he makes sacrifices. He is not living his best life anymore. He's living his children's best life. He's pouring into them because he sees that his legacy will be his family. It won't be the riches that he leaves behind. It'll be the children that he'll leave behind. And if they're going to be a tattered mess, how successful was he really? So I would say in today's culture, kids are screaming for this type of father because the other 3 don't seem to be serving them well. And society promotes all of the other 3. Why? Because that's what allows and, gets clicks. And it is basically like a horror show. It's a dumpster fire. Those are the ones that people essentially watch. And the other one, well, he's quite boring. He's, like I said, the leave it to beaver type, not somebody who's super exciting, but he's steadfast and true. And he ultimately is what is, and that kind of fatherhood is what's going to save these children and what they ultimately need. Anyway, I appreciate you watching. Thank you. You can also follow me in my Rumble and my Locals account. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so. I'm also at Twitter now at Camera612. You can check me out there, and I will see you next time.